Michael with United Veterans Worldwide, excited today to meet with Dr. Jen, as I call her, who is the spouse of my buddy Aaron, who I've interviewed before on this channel and told some of his stories, who's doing incredible work with the Toronto Police and the Military Veterans Wellness Program and all the outreach that's happening. I'm sure we'll talk about it today a little bit, but I really want to introduce you to Jen and hear her story from herself. So Jen, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so I work private sector. I have my own company called Phoenix Psychology, and I specialize in PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So my work bring me to work a lot with military, veterans, police officer, other first responder like nurses or medic, but mainly these days military and police officer. And I do PTSD treatment. I also do couple therapy when there is PTSD in the couple. And that's actually my favorite thing. That's really like where I love the most. I did my thesis in this. I was trained in specifically that. So that's what I prefer doing. I do a bunch of all of that. I'm part of the veteran, the Veteran Transition Network, where it's across Canada. So I'm doing Quebec and Ontario because I'm French. Obviously, you probably noticed that. So, and elsewhere, I'm going to go in Nova Scotia this spring too. So we take veterans and we do an intensive PTSD treatment with them for 1 week. It's we're renting a resort. Like it's all covered by True Patriot Love and VAC, Veterans Affairs Canada, and we're 2 psychologists, 6 participants, and we do an intensive PTSD program. It's one of the most beautiful things I do in my career. And right now I co-created this new group therapy that we do with couples. So we take couples and it's called Stronger, Closer Together, and we address the PTSD as a family affair, which is like my true love, That's what I really love people to do, like tackling this as a family. So that's about my work. That's a little bit what I do.
Well, that's incredible. So I do want to get into the PTSD program and this couples therapy together and talk through some of those things too, because as one who's gone through PTSD and who's on the other side of the cliff here and recovering in so many ways, I'm eager to touch on some of those points. But I want to know more about you as an individual and maybe what experiences you had in your life that have led to this type of work to make your life's work.
Yeah, so I always wanted to work with people. So my first career I was a teacher. I was a teacher in Indigenous community. Very random, but I'm from Chibougamau, which is north of Quebec, part of James Bay. So that's the first thing I was doing. I was working with Indigenous community. Actually, I was on an Indigenous community when I was teaching. And one of my students, she was my smartest student. Like, she was really the one kid, like, in your class. I was a French teacher and then English, because in Quebec, we have Cree community, they're English. So I was a French teacher in English. And my student that was the most brilliant, she came to school one day and she puts her head on her desk and she was like not herself. And I let her do that for a half day because it was so out of character. And then I asked her, what's going on? And she told me that she went at a sleepover the night before on her best friend and she got raped by her best friend's father. And that broke her in so many ways. And of course, they don't have the justice system that we have. Like, it's a little different with the Indigenous community. There's a lot of that, unfortunately. And she ended up dropping out. And then I found myself so foolish trying to teach her math and French when the only thing I wanted to do was talk about her trauma. But back then, I was young. I was like 25. I had 0 skills, but I knew I wanted to do that. Went back to school and did all the studies to become... I went to a master's degree, and I wanted to work with trauma and stuff. And then I did my master's degree, got a job in. Now I moved to Ottawa to study, of course, and then got a job in a mental health. And actually, it was a clinic like where there's a doctor, psychologist, a mental health professional, like a how do you call that? Like a holistic kind of clinic.
Yep.
And that's where I work. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I'm French. I'm going to add some terms.
You're good.
And then I met an admiral from World War II. I knew nothing about the army because in Quebec, it's not very... Quebec is a little bit apart from the rest of the country because of the language, but also for lots of federal entity or organization. Anyway, in north of Quebec, mainly, I was not, or my family, or the town, or I don't know, we're not very much into that world.
Yeah.
So really, that was the first time I met a military in that setting. That was amazing because I was a counselor at the time. I was in a psychologist yet, and I was fascinated because this man had like the most amazing story of like war story, life story, but also had a huge PTSD from World War II and forgot decades of his life. And this man, I think about him with like he passed away, unfortunately, this man, but with so much endearment. It was a 90 years old client of mine, and I just like clinically fell in love with that client, really. Like, I really loved him. He really touched my heart, and I was like, whoa, PTSD. And by then I had a master's degree, and I did a thesis in eating disorder. So I was really not in that field yet. It's really that man that changed everything for me. I was like, what is this thing, PTSD? That's insane. Like, I studied it in the master's degree, but not in depth at all.
Yeah.
And I was just like fascinated by what the brain can do when they face trauma. And it kind of like reminded me of my student that also faced trauma, had a very adverse effect on her life, like very adverse. To him too, because he forgot decades of his life. He didn't even remember marrying his wife, like huge. And then I decided, you know what, I want to study, I want to push that. I want to push PTSD prevention. That's what I want to do. PTSD prevention, that was my goal. So I started to do my PhD in the field. And I started in neuropsychology, and I did 2 years. And then we studied like a group of people, like from Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu in Canada. It's in Quebec. They trained officer. We were there and we interviewed them. Super fun, super fascinating. Then in my track, I started realizing if I stay in a PhD in neuropsychology, experimental neuropsychology, I'm going to end up in an office, like doing research. And I would miss people, you know, this connection and truly like being like hands-on with people. So I switched into a clinical program, and then I did prevention of PTSD with a couple of veterans and their spouse, and I did my thesis in that. How to decrease symptoms of PTSD and increase marital satisfaction through a specific approach called emotion-focused therapy for couple. That's what I did. So very long. So now I know that you can go from bachelor degree to do a combination of master and PhD. I did the longest route, like bachelor, master degree, 3 years in neuropsychology, experimental neuropsychology, to go back to clinical work. So basically, I have a long 15 years of this stuff, but it was super worth it because, you know, it really specialized in exactly what I wanted to work with.
Yeah. I love that. I love hearing the journey that you've had to take to get to where your true passion lies, to really make that change that you always wanted from the beginning in your 20s. There are a few things I want to touch on. One, I served as a missionary for my church in Alberta for 2 years when I was 19 to 21, and one of the areas that I served on was the Blackfoot Reservation in Alberta. And it was a cool experience to be able to meet people and talk with them about the diversity and culture and practices and everything. One of the saddest things that I learned while I was there was that it was nearly 100% sexual abuse. And
insane.
That was so shocking to me. It really hurt my heart to think that the children were so vulnerable because of bad coping mechanisms from parents, alcoholism, or whatever else was causing the issue. And I remember challenging some people to the effect of, like, why do we not break this cycle of abuse? And I remember this older Blackfoot woman looked at me and she said, "I have a name for you." And I said, What name? And she said, "Boy napsi napikowan." And I said,
"Okay.
What does that mean?" And she said, "Bothersome white man." I was like, okay, enough asking questions. But I learned from that example, and have through many experiences since, that the most common language in the world today, because my channel's a global channel, is trauma. Everybody can speak to it.
Unfortunately, isn't it?
Very sad. Very sad.
Yeah.
So you mentioned as well this life-changing experience meeting somebody. And you know, the work that I'm involved in now with this YouTube channel, putting myself out there on social media to connect with people who are struggling, parallels the important work that you're doing. And that connection that I get every day from different people, whether it's the phone call or making the video, is such a valuable piece of my healing journey and also theirs. And so I'm so grateful that you were in the right place at the right time, meeting this man, this admiral who was had incredible stories and experiences.
Yeah.
To then help you find that journey back to the groundwork, clinical work to change people's lives. Amazing.
Yeah, I know. And that was not, I could think trauma was the convictive kind of like rope there, but it's interesting because it was more than that. It was my fascination to this individual. He was an admirable admiral. Really. He was such a wonderful man. And I don't think I ever talked to, I think it's the first vet I talked to in my life. Had this profound impact on me, like profound. Life-changing, really. Yeah. I don't think he knows. Unfortunately, I don't think I could, like, he passed, so I can never tell him, that. But it was like this interest into, like, a veteran. It's like, what's the mindset of a warrior? Like, somebody that's willing to sacrifice everything. And especially World War II was kind of like a very intense war.
Yeah.
And so much story and so fascinating. It's his life story, the man in itself. Like, I remember talking to his physician. His physician was saying, this man is 20 years younger biologically than his true age. Every day, every morning, he would wake up at 6 and walk 5 kilometers. It was just like somebody at every level. It was somebody that you can look up to.
Wow.
But to feel his pain, and that's really, he was the embodiment of the warrior. But of course, this ethos sometimes comes with PTSD.
Yep.
Because that's the PTSD paradox is what makes you a good soldier. Is also PTSD symptoms, unfortunately. What's good in a war zone, you bring that at home, it's really not translating in the same. If you're emotionally detached when you're in combat, you're going to be awesome. Try to be emotionally detached with your wife on a Saturday night. It doesn't work at all. So that's really this paradox I was kind of understanding with that person. And this is where I was like, we need to be able to prevent that. Which brings me to other paradox. I think, PTSD and warriors, it's very fascinating. And also with Aaron being a special force and studying the training they do with special force, it's really they stress them until they're desensitized. And now they can be good soldier, which is a blessing and a curse, you know. And when you look at it every angle, it's also a paradox, but it's very fascinating too. I really am fascinated by that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because you're right. There is a time and a place for that. You want that, right? I think Jordan Peterson, a fellow Canadian, right? He mentioned something along the lines of you need to be a beast, but you need to be able to control it and release it when you need to release it, when it calls for it, to protect your home, your family, whatever. But the other times you've got to be able to shut it off and go back into society and do what you got to do.
It's in the switch. It's not easily flipped, or at some point it stopped flipping.
Yeah, and I think too many of us have it broken, that switch. And I talked to Aaron about it in his interview, where I just said fight or flight is broken. It's always in a state of fight, and not necessarily even in my breathing. So I might look to be calm, but my brain is still hearing, smelling, seeing, and it's hard to get that shut off. You know, you talk about
very hard
PTSD program. I attended an inpatient. No, it was an outpatient. So, but I was there for 2.5 weeks at this outpatient program in Boston, home base, and it was an incredible experience, because they put me through, what do you call it? Deliberate exposure therapy.
Prolonged exposure.
Yeah. Okay. And that was life-changing, to sit in a park where people around me were moving, and I had to keep my eyes closed and focus on making a new neural pathway that said, I'm not in danger. I don't hear anything that's putting me in danger. I can sit here and I can still be calm with my eyes closed. That really kick-started a new way of thinking in my brain that said, hold on, we're not always in danger. I don't have to hide knives and guns around the house in case, something happens. Like, there's a way to feel peace again, right?
Oh, you mean like a Louisville Slugger behind your bed? We have that at home too.
Well, and I still have some of those things. Well, obviously. Right? Yeah.
I got one of these under my bed too.
Yes.
You know why?
Yes.
Yeah, but that's really cool. Like, exposure therapy is amazing, because it's almost like you pretend that you're gonna be okay, but your body is relaxing, and like your body realizes, okay, like this is truly okay, nothing's happening.
Yeah. So
it's like your body is informing your brain that I'm chill, everything's chill, we can chill.
Yeah.
It's a good approach. I don't know if I can say that at this point, but I'm doing a very cool approach with PTSD. It's called reconsolidation therapy. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
Reconsolidation?
Reconsolidation therapy.
Reconsolidation, okay.
Yeah. It's new because I think it's been designed in 2012, which is super new in therapy, because we still use Freud. So something from 2012, it's quite like a baby.
Yeah.
But this was designed by a French researcher, which is usually it's the opposite. Like, it's English researcher, we translate it in French. Now it's from a French researcher from McGill University in Montreal. It's also very interesting. Behind every I think that behind every person that makes a difference, like you or this man I'm talking about, there's a story. So before being a psychologist, he was, I don't know if you heard, in 1989, in Quebec, there was this technical school of like techniques, engineering, IT, stuff like that. It was mainly men in that school. And with time, women introduced this kind of like school environment to do like this kind of work. And there's a man, his name is Marc Lepin, and he was very misogynistic, and he went one day in 1989 and killed 11 women.
Oh no.
Just because he was like, I don't want women doing this kind of work. Very misogyn. And in Quebec, that was huge, of course. And this man that designed this approach, his name is Alain Brunet, and he was there. He was a student there at the time, and he saw that. I didn't want to ask. You don't want to ask questions that could trigger people in the wrong setting. So I didn't ask. Were you physically there when it happened? So
yeah.
I'm not sure, but it feels like he was there, because after that he left the school and he decided that his mission was to cure PTSD, which I say cure. I never say cure in my world. I'm going to say that word, even if it's controversial. I will say it without the air quotes.
Yeah.
And so he did a lot of study about a drug called propranolol. I don't know if you know that drug. It's a blood pressure medication. So this drug is good for blood pressure, so it relaxes your vessels so the blood flow goes. But they find out for the last 40 years that propranolol has an impact on your memory. So if you give propranolol to rats and maize, they forget. Like, there's an impact on the memory with this drug. So this psychologist, this researcher, tried to do a bunch of research in the States, actually, with propranolol. He was working in ER, doing like a little like sample with people that he was giving in the ER after a traumatic incident. I think it was San Francisco. He was not sure. I think San Francisco. And he would give propranolol to people 2 hours before the event, and the control group that didn't have propranolol, they had a PTSD. This other group, they didn't have a PTSD for the same event. So you starting to think, okay, there's something to do here with a memory disorder, like PTSD is a memory disorder. Anyway, that's how we can conceptualize it in this approach.
Yeah.
So we use the combination of propranolol because it's a beta blocker, so it blocks your emotions. It blocks a lot of things. It's increasing your blood vessel flow, but it blocks your emotion for 2 hours when you take it. So you can imagine, if you take that, and I'm asking you to write the traumatic script of your traumatic story, but you have no emotions, it will be very much easier to talk about it, write about it. So what we create with that in a protocol of only 6 sessions, okay, it's very short term, it's only 6 sessions of half hour, it's really quick. We create an update in the brain. So it's like, let's say we meet today, me and you have an opinion of me. Let's say I meet with you in 3 weeks and I tell you I was a hockey player before, which isn't true, let's pretend.
Yeah.
Then it's going to update your memory of me. Oh, Jen, psychologist, hockey player, update the memory. So we create this update of the memory using propranolol and using the script that we write present tense, like the trauma happens today. We create an update on the memory. The update is you feel no emotion when you tell the update. So people, after 6 sessions, we score them on a scale. After every session, so sometimes they start at like, let's say the scale goes to 88, the cutoff is 27, people have 70. So I'm trying to get them below the cutoff, which is 27. 70% of people get below the threshold.
That's amazing.
Anymore. I know. And I would say to you, 70% are the conservative number. I'd say my experience of doing that for 4 years is closest to 90.
What? So that medication, that beta, blocks the emotion. You continue with the therapy of retelling the traumatic experience that would normally cause a physical reaction. And instead, the brain learns that process, adds a new memory on top of it, that we can handle this without the emotion, and then adjusts.
It updates automatically. So the thing is that memory is traumatic.
Yeah.
But with this when you write it and you read it without the emotional content, that's how the story is updated in your brain. It's like new information here. We do not feel bad about it. All right. So the first session, the person writes the whole script on present tense, and for 5 sessions, they just read it. That's the only thing they do. They take 6 pills total. It's not continuously. You take 1 pill before the session, so it's super active after 90 minutes. That's where we have the session. That's where it happens. It updates the memory. So because we do that, and we don't work on symptoms, we work on the root cause of it. All the symptoms, irritability, flashback, nightmare, coping mechanism like alcohol, that all drops. I know. I've never heard of that before. I know, it's because it was all French. It's pretty popular in French country, Lebanon, like these kind of places, Quebec. I translated it in English. It's been edited, but I'm the first person that ever used it in English before. I might be the only person in Ontario, me and my interns, that are doing it here. I want to bring that to you guys. We don't have it in the
Yes.
States. It's not in the States
Yes.
yet. I mean, it's not in the States yet.
Well, I could definitely put you in contact with some of the people that have been most pivotal in my experience, and organizations that have really responded well. I would love to have you talk with other professionals directly and say, here's my experience. What can they say? Like, we'll try it and see.
It's so amazing that I get excited. And I gotta be careful because I still talk about trauma, but I'm excited because never before we saw such groundbreaking results with such a small time. And even Alain Brunet, when he was designing this, he was thinking, it's too simple. It's too simple. It can't be working. It's too simple. It works.
Wow. And we're not just talking a solution for veterans or first responders. We're talking about any person who's gone through some trauma that has buried it, whatever is dealing with it in inappropriate ways, can benefit from the same type of treatment.
Yeah. When you think about it, so we do that with adjustment disorder too. Like, let's say it's not life-threatening, you lost your job, so it's not a PTSD, it's not life-threatening, but you kind of have difficulty, you can have nightmares about that, flashbacks, that works with this population too. Heartbreaks. Let's say your wife, you find your wife in bed with another man. This is quite traumatic, not life-threatening, but still,
Well, for the other person it would be.
Yeah. All of the above.
Yeah.
So that worked well with that as well. Phobia. Let's say you have phobia of dogs because you got bitten. Like, it's a traumatic memory when you think about it. That works that for that. So that's so amazing. And it's beautiful because what happens, I'm just gonna share with you a couple case that I worked with this. Like, there was one man that I treated, and he got raped when he was a kid, unfortunately. So his mom was an immigrant, hardworking woman, so she was always coming to the daycare a little later than the other mom, so he was kind of stuck with the man that was working there, and he got assaulted in the closet. So he has very vivid, terrifying memory of that. So when we started doing this treatment, very fascinating. So the nightmare decreased in this way. So he used to dream about that almost every night, super awful. And then when we started the treatment, he was seeing the door of the closet, but he was not in the closet anymore. He was in the room, but not in the closet. And then the next week, he was in another room of the daycare, and then he ended up being the other side of the street. So he was kind of getting away from the trauma in his nightmare to the point he stopped having nightmares. And it's truly what it's doing to people. And everybody, 100%, and I'm not saying that to prompt them before, I just don't say that, but everybody around session 4, they say the same thing. It's always, it feels like it didn't happen to me. Like, I feel like I'm reading someone else's story.
That's amazing. And you're documenting all of the results to share?
Yeah. I score every session.
That's amazing.
We have baseline every session and follow up in 3 months. And even the score they have when I finish the 6th session, it's even lower when they follow up in 3 months. Like, sometimes 2.
Yeah. So when we look at the history of wars and conflicts, there's always something globally happening, but to ourselves, the U.S. and Canada as an example, U.S. stopped combat operations around 2020. We pulled out of Afghanistan in 2021. Canada did prior to that. Now there's this period where people are serving in the military, but without conflict necessarily, right? Yeah. Unless they go to Ukraine or unless they go to Israel or whatever those big conflict areas are. Now we have this period of time when military guys are going to be doing their 4 to 6 years of time and getting out into society without experiencing what we would consider normal PTSD, because they haven't been in combat or in those scenarios, right? But inevitably, the cycle of violence in our countries will pick back up again. we'll deploy them someplace, and then here comes a whole new generation of people who struggle. I once gave a talk to an audience about my experiences, and I didn't go into great details of the trauma. I just mentioned that I faced some hard situations, pushed it down to cope with the scenario, and then pushed on and really didn't deal with it. And after I finished, I remember this older guy, white hair, bushy white beard, came up to me, and he was quite emotional, and he was embarrassed about his emotion, which I immediately told him, don't be embarrassed, like, this is, and I found out he was a Vietnam veteran, fought in Vietnam and Korea. Nasty war, right?
Yes.
And had undealt with trauma. And he said, I don't know how you could get up there and speak to us, knowing what you've gone through, because there's no way I could do it. And I just put my arm around this older man, and I just said, hey, brother, like, there is a way. There is hope. There is a way to move from here. But unfortunately, for that generation, there was a gap in resources. Whatever they faced, they drowned in alcohol or suicide or homelessness or whatever, and that was the end of their story. I'm so glad that there are people like you who continue to push the envelope of therapy that says there's a way for trauma to triumph, from darkness to light. Yes.
Post-traumatic growth. It seems like you are doing that.
Yes. Yes.
It's beautiful. Like, you've been, that's why my company is Phoenix Psychology, and I have a tattoo of a phoenix on my wrist, because to me, that's what it is, post-traumatic growth. Trauma brings you to your ashes. There is no questions. Trauma kills you, for sure. But what you're using to get out of there, to reborn from these ashes, is beautiful. Like, you're an example of this, right?
Yes.
Like, there's a lot of people that can say that too. Like, they start foundations, and like even Aaron, what he's doing with his program is a little bit like that.
Yes.
A way to rebuild himself up. Like, you can take the guy out of the army. You cannot take the army out of the guy. So I think he's got a purpose as well to do this. It's along this line.
Yep.
This is very inspiring, what you guys are doing. It's post-traumatic growth.
Yep. Post-traumatic growth. I love that word. Let me write that down.
Oh, I love this. Is my favorite word, because truly, I wouldn't be doing the job I do if I wouldn't believe that this is true. That what you go through, suffering, makes you a better person.
Yeah. 100%.
And I love a lot, like Ryan Holiday, and I read Obstacles the Way. I don't know if you ever read that book, but that's what it's talking about. Like, what's in the way, what the block is, the way you get around it, the gate, the way you get through it, will make you a better person in anything.
Yeah.
So I believe in that a lot.
I come in contact with veterans, first responders around the globe, nearly daily. Someone new. I'll find someone who, through recommendation, someone's like, "Hey, there's this guy, and he's really struggling," and I'll reach out to him. And as soon as he learns that I'm a veteran, and then I share, like, "Hey, I've been to that edge of that cliff when I was struggling. We don't have to walk over the edge. We can back up. There's hope. There's it's incredible to experience that, because it also reminds me of how important the work that you do, that Aaron does, that I'm doing. It really will help make a change. I interviewed a guy who had never told his stories before, actually several, and in the interview prior to, I do a discovery call, kind of like I had with you before we had you on the channel, and just had a phone call with you, and he's like, "Hey, I'm not gonna tell you those stories. I'm not gonna get emotional on your channel. I'm not gonna do that." And he was pretty aggressive, and I just took it. I just said, "That's fine, whatever." I said, "But let me tell you about me for a second." And because when he sees me now smiling in a bright room, right, he's like, this guy cannot relate. And so I walked him back in time, and I said, 2017 was a hard year for me, for my family. I struggled so badly and I felt alone. I isolated. I picked up negative coping habits. And I pushed myself further away from people, society, everything. And I know what that darkness looks like. I know what it feels to sit on the edge. And I said, now that I've shared that with you, what are your thoughts? And it was amazing because he opened up. He's like, and he started to call me brother. And he's like, I had no idea that you would understand. I'm like, yes. The only reason I felt inspired to start this channel is because I know that there are people out there who were stuck like I was. And I don't want anybody to feel like there's no hope, that they're stuck, and that's just the condemning diagnosis of PTSD or even TBI effects. There are still things we can do to get to the next level, right?
Totally. You know what I like about what you just said? Is how you share your story. You know, this is not a word that warriors like to talk about, but vulnerability brings vulnerability. It's the key that unlocks the process. I find it beautiful that you can do that, because only a person that shows you that you can give that back. You know? I'm sure. Did he share a story after?
Oh, yes. And it was quite traumatic, and I could see how a person going through that scenario would have trauma, and there's no way to deal with it in the middle of chaos. You just kind of absorb it. And when he told me his story, I remember I got emotional hearing it. And he was getting emotional, and he was shocked that I was showing emotion. And I said, I am not afraid to show emotion. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't feel like I diminish my strength, my ability as a warrior. Instead, it's like I can empathize so greatly with what you're feeling. And you already mentioned the word an empath, right? Like, you can feel what people are feeling. And that really is something that helps you to help somebody else out, because you then can truly say, I identify with this right here.
I know what you've been through, right? So that's saying that and showing that. To me, it's like the measure of strength. To be able to be also able to connect with that part of the vulnerable self. Yeah.
And we mentioned before we got on the official interview here today, the Veterans Gala, the Military Veterans Wellness Program Gala that was held in Toronto last month, early last month, was an incredible opportunity to meet with first responders, veterans, people who support veterans, to hear all those wonderful speeches. It really was an incredible experience, and I just want the global audience today to know more about that experience where Dr. Jen got up on stage with other wives, and they shared their experiences with helping their husbands build this program, sustain their spouses in their recovery themselves. It was very inspiring to see and to hear you say those words.
It was easy for me because Aaron is very inspiring, like, to say the least. I know Aaron is a smart man, and I knew that he could do great things, but the relentlessness with which he's working, like, day and night, and he doesn't stop, like, I'm sure people assume that because of what he's done, but it's really true in his daily life. Aaron is absolutely goal-oriented, and where he looks forward, he goes, but that means a lot of, like, phone calls and a lot of people and a lot of meetings and a lot of PRs, and he's doing an event, they speak at an event, but he will do the 2 hours PR afterwards. He's relentless. he's inspiring me for real. Like I never saw somebody such a hard worker in my life. Aaron is a hard worker, but very smart too, and he knows to associate with other people. He's very good at delegating. He's very good at creating teams around him. So it's really incredible what he's done. I was there from the start, and I never thought this. I didn't even know he had a scope outside of Toronto Police.
Yeah.
And then he started to meet here and there, and there it's in Australia. It's, he presented in the United States, and now he's going to Ukraine. And that really, I'm proud of that, because this is like a true things we can do to help them. Like, this is meant. They don't have a lot of resources, so it's so beautiful. And I gotta say that we went to Boston to present the program in the IACP, the International Association of Chief of Police. And there were people from around the world with their translator and everything, their mic and their translator. And we presented, and the Ukraine delegation came to listen to it. And then that was so beautiful, because they were talking in Ukrainian, and they had the translator afterwards, and they said to Aaron and Jeremy, after there was a question, and I've been through all these like stuff before. They ask questions. If they ask questions, it's really about the program. But the Ukrainian, they were like, first of all, you guys are heroes. Coming from them, everybody was crying.
Oh, that's amazing.
It was so beautiful. I was like, so at that moment, I was so proud. It's true, and it's nice that they, Jeremy and Aaron, can bring that over there. That's much needed, and we can do good work. Amazing, And as a wife, it's nice because he deploys in a it's a war zone, but he's not going to go fight. He's going to do a long-lasting program that can live on for centuries after we're not there anymore,
Yeah.
So that's really could help tons of people. So I'm super proud of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is a groundbreaking program. When Aaron first explained it to me, I said, it's so simple, and yet so complicated, and requires so much collaboration, coordination to make it really something that works. But they found a way to do it.
Yeah. With association, so I did the mental health part of it, like all the explanation of PTSD. I wrote that stuff.
Yeah.
And he associated with a very known negotiator, Dr. Collins, Peter Collins. You might know him. And his, what he calls his little sister. He'd always say, "My little sister is smarter than me," and she brought the measurement framework, which is like in the program a way to measure the success of the program. In the program, this is groundbreaking. They do that. It's new in D&D that they do that kind of stuff. So that now we have this because Ali, she's a research scientist. So funny story. Just on the side, these 3 years I spent kind of losing 3 years doing experimental neuropsychology.
Yeah.
I didn't lose this time. Like, I learned a lot, but I had to redo everything on the clinical PhD. But I met Ali. Ali and me were in the same classes. That's how I met Aaron.
Through her?
Ali, we were doing our PhDs together. And so I got Aaron out of this 3 years that I was, oh man, I lost so much time. And then I know, because, that had such a big influence on my life afterwards. So I got friends with Ali, and she introduced me to Aaron, and since then we're married. So it's kind of beautiful. Yeah.
It's incredible. So I love the concept of being in the right place at the right time with the right people doing the right things. When all of those things line up, everything becomes magic, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he has the idea to start this program. You're there as the resource, as the expert to talk through some of those pieces. Like, how does that ever come together like that unless it's designed? It's amazing.
I know. And even that started with tattoos. He talked about this event, like the man was decompensating in the ambulance, and he had a tattoo, and Aaron put on the shirt, and he showed his Caesar tattoo. I
Right.
take credit for this tattoo, because when I met Aaron, he was no tattoo. I have tons of tattoo, and I'm like, how come you're special force guys? No tattoo? You should have a tattoo at least of your, like, a thumb arm or something, you know? We went to BC, and we got tattoos, so I take credit for that tattoo.
Yeah, I don't have any tattoos either. I just have scars.
No? Okay.
My scars are my tattoos now. So
There you go. I feel like saying respect.
well, Jen, this has been an incredible conversation today. You are absolutely lovely. I totally understand now why Aaron's like, you've got to talk to my wife. She has an amazing story that has taken it full circle back to now where she's helping people so greatly. In the last 2 minutes here, Jen, will you share with me your advice for this global audience who's tuning in who may be struggling with their own trauma?
It's going to be very simple and even boring, but if you struggle, go seek professional help. I know it's not sexy or cool, but we're trained, we spend like 15 years to have the honor to listen to your guys' story and help you navigate this. Go to see a trained professional, and PTSD is not a life sentence. It can be improved, and now I can say it can also be cured. That's my advice. That's
perfect. Perfect. Jen, thanks so much for joining us today and participating and sharing this vision of healing with all of us today. It's exactly what I hoped it would be.
My pleasure. Anytime.
All right, great. I look forward to more interactions with you and your spouse in the future.
Likewise.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.